We're going to be talking about grants and foundations. And I know that everyone who's watching this webinar has experience in writing grant applications. And so this isn't so much going to focus on how to write a grant application, but rather on how to see to it that your grant application has the maximum chance of a successful outcome. And to start, I want to tell you about an experience that I had a couple of years ago when I had the good fortune to be on a committee that got to be on the other side of the checkbook. We were reviewing and evaluating grant applications for a charitable foundation. And our committee was able to dismiss outright more than half of the applications we received without so much as a cursory skimming. And that's exactly what I want to have not happen for our Boys and Girls Clubs. And so with that in mind, we'll talk about two key considerations today. First, the funder, and second, your proposal. So let's start with the funder. Okay, a little bit of background. Some basic facts on foundations. There are 86,192 foundations in the United States, and in 2015, they totaled 16% of all private giving in the U.S. That's $57 billion. There are four basic types of foundations: independent, community, corporate, and operating. And in a handout that I will have attached that you can download after the webinar, you can read a little bit more about each one of these. So the first step really is to find the funders. And this is an area where I think sometimes we rush just a little bit and we say, yep, they're taking applications, let's put it in. But it would be a much better strategy to spend a little bit of time fact-finding. So identify those people who you think are your prospects and then do a deeper dive on the foundation. Because by doing research through places like GuideStar, Foundation Center, Chronicle of Philanthropy, you will figure out who has both the capacity to give to you as well as the inclination to give to you. Because it may be that through doing your research you find that this organization only gives to higher education or only gives to religious organizations. And at that point, there's no reason to spend your time and effort writing a grant to them. The next thing you want to do is determine that first approach strategy. And so very often, this is already predetermined by the prospect themselves. The foundation says this has to be done via email. When you have the opportunity to set up a phone call or a personal visit, you absolutely should. But otherwise, you need to use the first approach strategy that the foundation sets forth. Sometimes they will say that they don't accept unsolicited proposals. Don't waste your time or theirs writing a proposal if they say that, because they won't review your proposal at all. As you're considering which are your best prospects, also think about the why of foundation giving. Why does this foundation provide charitable funding? Because if you really think about why they're giving, you can put together a proposal that really fits into their philanthropic desires. So are they wanting to increase the capacity of nonprofits to serve constituents? Do they have a specific legacy interest in a cause or organization? For example, the founder with whose fortune this was created was very, very interested in helping youth, or better yet, helping Boys and Girls Clubs. It may be that they have a commitment to a specific region. And when that's the case, of course, you want to be sure that you're in that region, because otherwise you absolutely won't even get a second. Or it may be that they aspire to have national or international impact on a particular issue. Some great examples of this would be Kellogg, Annie E. Casey, Gates Foundation, who are really looking to do things on a major, major scale. As you're evaluating who you're going to approach, don't take shots in the dark. It can seem like, well, you know, I may as well send out a proposal to these folks. I mean, who knows? I might get funded. If you're taking a shot in the dark, you won't get funded. It is a waste of your time, because you spend time writing that proposal, researching that proposal, printing it off, putting on the right number of binder clips, getting it in the envelope. It's not worth your time. It's a waste of the funder's time to have to review your proposal when you're not going to fit. It harms your image too. So let's say that you go ahead and you decide, you know what, I'm going to write a proposal and I'm going to seek some money for services to the elderly, which we absolutely don't do at the Boys and Girls Club, but maybe you figured out some way that you can put together some convoluted argument that, yeah, sure we do, sure, why not? When the funder sees that proposal and knows that you didn't respect their guidelines, but you submitted anyway simply because you want their money, it puts you in a bad light in their eyes. Let's say that the next funding period, they instead are looking for something that helps support the outcomes, educational outcomes of youth. Now you'd like to apply, but you've already showed the funder that you're not respectful of their wishes by sending in that last application, so you won't be viewed as well. So you're wasting your time, you're wasting their time, you're harming your image. You're also wasting the funder's resources. Every time that somebody sends in a proposal that someone has to review that isn't going to get funded, the funder has to use money to pay for staff to screen those proposals that are a waste of their time. That is money that could go to funding your mission. So it's a waste of their resources. It's a waste of your resources. And lastly, taking shots in the dark can result in mission creep. So let's say that you do get funded for your program to serve the elderly. Now all of a sudden, you're going to be doing something that takes you outside of our mission to serve the kids who need us most because you've got the money to do it. So don't chase the dollars. Have a good project and the dollars will come. So here's how to evaluate your fit. There are really 3 things you should look at. First, is it a geographic fit? If you know this funder only funds projects in Arizona and you're in New Mexico, you're close, but it's not worth applying. If you know that the mission doesn't fit with what you do, or if the timing of your project doesn't coincide with the timing of what the organization is trying to do. For example, you need funding for summer brain gain, but this is a proposal for a project that needs to be carried out in the winter. So once you have all 3 of those fitting, that's your sweet spot. Take the perspective of the funder as you evaluate your opportunity to make a proposal. They have lots and lots of staff. They have lots and lots of proposals. They have a limited number of staff. And so the result can be that each proposal only really gets a cursory consideration. So we may think there's going to be some that are terrible. There are going to be some that are a shoo-in. As long as we fall in the middle, we should be fine. But really that's not the case because there are so many proposals out there and such a limited number of staff to consider them. So as you're thinking about this kind of equation, remember that your program officers are people too. So communicate with those program officers before you submit. Talk to them. Find out anything that they can tell you about the mission of that foundation. Talk to them during the review process. Is there any other information they need? What else can you send them? Absolutely contact that program officer once they've decided to fund you. Would they like to talk to you more? Would they like to tour the facilities? Would they like to meet key staff face-to-face? During the funding period, too, it's okay if things aren't going as well as you thought they would when you proposed for funding. You should just keep the foundation updated because that may actually be a decision to give you more funding to help you get those outcomes, but they really don't like it when they don't learn that your project was unsuccessful until after the funding period is over. And even when you get declined, it's okay to contact them and in a very professional and friendly way, ask for any feedback that might make you more successful the next time that you apply with them. Understanding that equation of a limited staff and many proposals, also we need to understand the screening techniques. So online forms, we're all familiar with those where you have to count every single word. Oftentimes the first person to read your proposal is an intern or a low-level staff member. So as a result, you need to be sure that your proposal is easily understood by an intern, that the impact stands out, that the fit to mission stands out right off the bat on first reading. If it gets past that first screener, it's going to go to a program officer who has a much more sophisticated understanding of the projects that they want to fund and of the landscape of nonprofits in general. So you need techniques that will let you get by both levels of screeners. Here are a few. First, your summary is essential. Particularly that first reader, that intern, that may very well be all that they read. So you want that summary to be absolutely as good as it can be. Jargon-free, easy to read, full of impact. Focus also on the very first sentence of each section, because when someone's just skimming through, this may be all that they read. And you can ask multiple people in your organization, please read my summary, please read my first sentences to make sure that those are really good. Avoid jargon, cliches, and unnecessary superlatives. We're the greatest, we're the best, we're the most essential. And really focus on verbs that show how you enact the change that you purport to achieve. So now let's talk about the proposal itself. The components of a proposal are laid out in here. You've got your executive summary, your statement of need, and your project description. This is where you're really laying out what you're going to do. Here, you're going to lay out how you're going to do it with your budget, your information about the organization, and your conclusion or your summary. And that conclusion is really the most important part. Of course, it's all important, but that's the most important. So working on the summary, be sure to state the purpose of the project, outline the process to be used, reiterate the outcomes again. Impact the funder's objectives, but don't regurgitate them. They're smart enough to know if all you've done is just copy down their objectives as yours. And you don't need to pander, unnecessary flattery, etc. Stick to tangible, outcome-based language. Spend most of your time on that summary. Lots of folks read it. Edit and revise ruthlessly. Be clear, concise, and compelling. You don't need to be salesy here. You want to be factual. Don't gush about yourself. Explain the positive impacts for kids that you will accrue. A few good tips before submission. I can't say enough times, have other people review it. You'd be amazed at what suddenly you realize is a mistake that's in there that you hadn't noticed before. Use a 12-point pitch, left justified, and 1-inch margins. Those are all standard means of writing, and varying away from that standard, for example, a smaller point pitch so you can get in more words. Your reviewers are going to see through that, and it's a reason to reject your application outright, which we don't want. Use lots of headings, subheadings, and bullets because this will make it so much easier to read through your application and to get to those key points. Before you submit, here are a few things that'll just make you stand out as highly professional. Adding page numbers at the bottom, adding a footer, which includes your organization's name and the funder's name. That way, nothing's going to get lost and misplaced from one another. All of the required and requested attachments, but not extra attachments that were not requested, just the stuff they're asking for. Use binder clips or paper clips, not staples. And this seems really silly, but usually they will take your proposal, make multiple copies, give it to their screeners, and then if it's successful, they give it to their board members, and so the staple just gets in the way. And those kinds of things matter. You know, they can dismiss you outright for not having a paper clip, and we don't want that. And of course, send it on time. If it's going to get there late, don't even bother. A few tips for success. Staying local makes sense. You have local impact. Local funders want local impact. Those great big huge national foundations are unlikely to fund you unless you have sort of a state consortium or you're working with multiple clubs. Don't express mail your application because what that says to the funder is either we're poor stewards of resources or we don't have it together enough to get this thing sent in on time. Wait till you see what we do with your money. You can hand deliver, which is a nice personal touch as long as you're not doing it at the last minute. Have your people call their people. If you have board members who know board members or execs at the foundation to which you're applying, this is a great way to get those board members involved in resource development without them having to do any asking. They can talk about the program. They can ask that they put in a good word for you, etc. We've already said follow the specific requirements. Can't emphasize that enough. Double check the mailing address just to be sure that the foundation hasn't moved or the address that you have is not inaccurate because you wouldn't want it to get lost in the mail. Get to the point. Don't be superfluous. And finally, send a thank you. After you receive a rejection, you can send a thank you for consideration, a sincere thank you for consideration because you do appreciate what they're doing in the community and you do appreciate their consideration. And you're trying to build a relationship with that program officer and that thank you note's going to help to do that. I have a number of resources here which will be listed on the PowerPoint PDF that you can download after this workshop. One of them that I think is really helpful if you're newer at grants is this last one, the Foundation Center's Introduction to Finding Grants course. It's totally free. It's self-paced. It's really, really helpful for just sort of helping you understand how to apply for grants. There are also a couple of articles, resources for finding grants listed here. And here are the resources for you to download. If you go into the handout section on your dashboard there, you'll find a great grants task calendar that was put together by the Boys and Girls Clubs of St. Louis. It's the way that they make sure they never miss deadlines. Key facts on U.S. Foundations 2014, which is the most recent year available, and then a PDF of these PowerPoint slides. That concludes our discussion of grants and foundations. I'm going to stay on the line for anybody who would like to bring up discussion or ask questions. Or if you would like to reach out to me outside of this webinar, here's all my contact information, and I would love to talk to you. So with that, I hope that your wishes are granted, and thank you so much for joining us.